Hey, I'm Amanda from Trifecta Fitness. We're proud to be Clarksville's new Get Fit headquarters. Trifecta Fitness is a state-of-the-art spin and strength training studio. Our spin studio is truly one of a kind in this area, complete with 20 state-of-the-art live fitness bikes and an incredible sound system. Our strength training is done in small groups of 6 or fewer, and all of our strength and spin classes are scalable for every level of experience. Come see us in the heart of Clarksville, just behind MAPCO at the corner of Old Trenton Road and Wilma Rudolph Boulevard. Call us for more info at 931-542-6265 or download our Trifecta Fitness app for a full list of...
Hello, my name is Damon Friedman, co-founder and president of SOF Missions. As a 20-year veteran within Special Operations, I've gone through many challenges due to my military service and time in combat. We felt called to start SOF Missions to serve our fellow brothers and sisters in arms, focusing on suicide prevention and resiliency. Our mission at SOF Missions is to empower warriors to find purpose and be resilient. Since 2011, when we started the organization, almost 3 million men and women have deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. Unfortunately, the scars of war take a toll on their psychological, physical, social, and spiritual health. Many veterans feel a sense of hopelessness and a loss of purpose when they return to civilian life. They feel isolated and alone, unable to reconnect. And in the greatest of tragedies, over 20 veterans lose all hope and take their own lives. Our goal at SOF Missions is to provide veterans the tools and resources so that they don't become a statistic. We offer a unique approach to combating veteran suicide through a whole health, intradisciplinary model. The Be Resilient program is a 4-pillar methodology that addresses the areas of psychological, physical, social, and spiritual wellness. We provide care through 3 delivery methods: medical clinics, retreats, and educational training. Since we started back in 2011, we have been able to reach veterans in all 50 states and have served over 3,000 veterans through the Be Resilient program. Being resilient is a multifaceted and complex issue. We know that to find a lasting solution, we have to address the whole warrior. Many challenges cannot be solved by providing the treatments and modalities of just one component, but by tackling them all. Now, we've expanded our services to include law enforcement and first responders. Together, we can make a lasting impact in the lives of warriors across the nation. To learn more, visit our website at sofmissions.org.
All right. Welcome back.
MisFitNation. MisFitNation. The MisFitNation show.
We are a show founded by a veteran and hosted by 2 veterans and a military spouse. Our mission is to get people to tell their stories to the world. If you're an author, share your tips with the MisFitNation. If you're a musician or an actor, our audience needs to know how they too can get into the business. Coaches, we love our coaches. Come on and share your tips with the MisFitNation to help them become better versions of themselves. If you are a corporate leader or an entrepreneur, come on and show how you did it and how hard you have fought for success. If you are a veteran, first responder, or Gold Star family, we would love to have you come on and share your story with the MisFitNation. We always have time for you. If you're feeling down, alone, or starting to see the darkness, stop. Think about those who are around you. You are not alone. You will be missed. If you feel like your problems will be a burden to those in your inner circle or feel embarrassed, dial 988. If you are a veteran, take option 1. We need you to keep pushing forward. Don't make a permanent solution to a temporary problem. If you are a new listener, welcome to the MisFitNation show. Be sure to subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast app. Also on our YouTube channel at @the_MisFitNation. Subscribe and click the bell to keep you up to date on our latest episodes and all of our news. You can also find us on Heroes Media Group and About Face Radio. Now, let's get to the show!
welcome back to the MisFitNation show. It's your Sunday after dinner show. It's great to have you here tonight. I think all the sports are done for the day. Jake will probably argue with me and tell me that baseball is still going on, but we don't watch baseball here until around September because that's the only time it really matters. And the Mets will be out of it by that time anyway. Tonight we have a great guest, but first we have to put a little announcement out there. We still have 4 3rd Infantry Division soldiers who have not been able to recover from a training accident. Efforts are still ongoing in Lithuania right now. They're using all available assets in the country. Both countries are working diligently to try to unstuck that Hercules recovery vehicle, the M88, with the crew in it, we believe, and get it out of there. They have 3 pumps going, sucking the water out, digging the mud out to try to get that vehicle out. So let's keep those dog-faced soldiers, their families, their brothers and sisters in your hearts and prayers as they brave this difficult time. Our next guest is a completely blind Marine Corps veteran. He's a writer, he's a speaker, he's an entrepreneur, an athlete who lost his sight in 2019 due to a suicide attempt. When he was taken off of life support, he awoke to find that the bullet hadn't killed him, but had taken all of his sight and hearing in one ear instead. But he refused to become a bump on the log and has entirely redefined himself in the time since. Even despite having struggled with alcoholism and being diagnosed with an incurable, deadly genetic disease whilst trying to conquer his addiction. So without further ado, let's welcome USMC veteran, writer, athlete, and entrepreneur, Zach Tidwell, to the MisFitNation. Welcome, Zach.
What's up, man? Thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's awesome to have you here, brother. I'm glad we were able to connect via the world of social media. I think Cagney or Steve was able to link in with you and send you our way. So it's great to have you here, brother. And we're proud to have your journey on here and have you share your story with us.
Yeah, the hope is that it'll keep someone else from going on that same road and maybe inspire somebody too once we get past all the the heavy stuff. So
hell yeah,
I'm excited.
All right, Zach. So you heard what I said about you. It's basically the first paragraph of your bio I gave. Let's hear the rest of Zach from as far back as you want to go. What led you to the Marines and what happened on the way out?
I wanted to go in the military my entire life. My dad's a vet. Most of the men in my family are vets, and so I definitely, I wanted to be like my dad and be like them. But I decided on the Marine Corps when I was 16 and I wanted to be a grunt. So I started talking to a recruiter and he was like, hey man, I can't talk to you until you're 17. So come back then. And I did and joined the delayed entry program and then wound up going to boot camp straight out of high school. And I was a machine gunner and was in for 4 years, deployed twice, but never saw combat. And I really got into trouble because I didn't have a healthy set of coping skills, and it was a bad combination of a severe concussion from a motorcycle accident right at the time when I had just separated from my now ex-wife because she'd been cheating on me during my second deployment. And up until the motorcycle accident, I was dealing with it. I wasn't the happiest that I'd ever been, but I was getting through it. And I spiraled after that concussion, and I became very agitated and very impulsive. And then I started struggling with sleep, and eventually found that having a couple beverages before bedtime would help me fall asleep. And I wouldn't stay asleep, but I would at least get a couple hours. And so that motorcycle accident was in March of 2018. I was honorably discharged in August of 2018, and then got out and was going to school full time and working full time and keeping up appearances that I was doing good, even though I was continuing to get worse and worse, both in a mental state, and that couple drinks before bedtime did turn into just me being a functional alcoholic. I was drinking just about every night, and I mean, to the point of oblivion a lot of the time. And by the time that March of 2019 rolled around, I just had reached a point where, because I wasn't speaking up, I erroneously thought that the spot that I was in was inescapable. And so I found what I thought was my way out. And March 27th, I cleared my concealed carry firearm out and held it to my head for the first time. And 4 days later, I shot myself in between the eyes.
Wow. And this
Yeah.
stuff.
So, yeah. So yeah, Monday will be 6 years, it's kind of wild. So I say what caught up with me there was not speaking about it. And I try and always emphasize this because it does, especially with veterans. I think men more so in general than women. But obviously this does, suicide affects women too. I was not speaking up because I thought that to do so was to show weakness. And I thought that because I had made it through the Marine Corps infantry that I could and I'd done that by gritting my teeth through things and just kind of lowering my head down and doing the grind, that I could do that with my mental health. And I was wrong. And it turns out that self-medicating doesn't really work out in that context. And speaking up in the time since is why I'm still here. As you can imagine, it's not like my life got any easier after I shot myself. But I also try and make a point to emphasize this because I think, people get caught off guard a lot of times. And even in my situation, when someone dies from suicide or attempts suicide, people around them don't, everyone's kind of shocked. But yet when the mainstream media talks about it, or people talk about it who don't have experience with it, everyone talks about these overt warning signs that you should see of, oh, this person was withdrawing or saying these sideways comments of like, oh, maybe the world would be better off without me. Or, now I'm giving all my things away to people and saying my goodbyes. And that's not, I hid my struggles and what I was going to do to myself up to the very minute that I shot myself. As I grew more and more apathetic about things and was trying to just have to force myself to do anything, and outside of working out, going to school and going to work, like I would drive a couple hours up to the mountains to try and get myself out of the house to snowboard, because that was always one of my favorite things to do. And I get there and be like, man, I still don't want to be here. And instead of just going home, I would sit in my truck for a couple hours before driving home so that it looked like I went snowboarding. I did the same thing with my dirt bike out at the racetracks. And I mentioned that on March 27th is the first time I held my gun to my head and decided that I was going to kill myself. On March 30th, my parents were at my apartment with my two younger sisters in the very room where I had just decided that a couple days beforehand. I didn't say a single thing about it. And even the next day when I did shoot myself, I talked to I was in the middle of recording a suicide video to my family instead of writing a note, just to explain things. And because I felt that was more personal. My roommate came home early in the middle of me doing that. And so I paused it, went out in the kitchen and talked to him like nothing was wrong, and then went back in my room and shot myself a couple minutes later.
So he was the one that found you or responded to you.
Yeah. And even, that was, again, kind of just by happenstance. He got home early, and I had taken longer than I thought, like making that video, because that was the first time that I had ever opened up about any of this stuff. And yeah, so our apartment was set up so that my bedroom and stuff was on one side, the living room and like kitchen and stuff was in the middle, and then his room and bathroom was on the other side. And I guess he was back in his room and he heard the gun go off, and he thought that like a pot had fallen out in the kitchen or something, and he came out and nothing was out of place. So he knocked on my door, and I was slumped on my bed with a bullet hole in my forehead. And I don't remember any of this. I guess I woke up while he was on the phone with 911 and then was awake all the way into the hospital and even combative, probably because, I was sober on the night that I decided I was going to shoot myself. I was not sober the night that I shot myself. I had decided that I was going to drink for a little liquid courage. And so now, I'm drunk, the incredible head trauma of having shot yourself in the head, and then now totally blind and deaf in one ear, and I'm sure my body was just in like survival mode and that's why I was combative. But they wound up putting me on life support after I got to the hospital, and when I woke up, I was, like I said, totally blind and deaf in one ear and needed to have my face pieced back together.
Wow. And how long were you on life support? Do you remember?
I don't know. And I think it was a week, maybe 2 weeks, but it's hard. I was so out of it when they brought me to, I didn't even realize that I was blind. From the time that I shot myself, I've been completely blind, but like I was so messed up, I think from a combination of the brain injury of that and just all the meds that I was on, that I could have a conversation like we're having right now, but I was seeing these very, very vivid, just nonsensical settings, even though I couldn't even, like, it wouldn't even be a person that I would see. It was just like these crazy backdrops, but so they couldn't even get the point across to me that I was blind. And that first little bit is pretty blurry to me because I was so out of it, even after they brought me off of life support.
Wow. Yeah. And I mean, it's a traumatic event for you, for your roommate, and for your family, of course, was that they had to come as well to be there with you at the hospital and such. And on this show, we've had no less than probably 8 different dudes come on here and talk about how they went through their steps to the final point, and not one of them ever pulled the trigger. There was a divine intervention on all of them that stopped them from pulling the trigger, or the weapon malfunctioned. You went ahead, pulled the trigger, and you took away your sight, you took away your hearing, but you didn't take away your grit, you didn't take away your resilience at that point. I think this is a point in your life where it kind of turns you upside down and made you shake your body up, like shaking baby syndrome almost, and made you run forward. And now that's what you're doing now.
Yeah, and it literally, it's kind of wild. So for the first couple of weeks I was in the hospital, they were telling me that I was going to get sight back in my left eye because basically, I mean, the bridge of my nose, the lower part of my forehead, and my sinuses and my right eye socket were basically gone. So that side got messed up way worse than my left for some reason, and my left optic nerve was still intact. And so they'd been telling me, like, yeah, when you get the facial reconstruction, you're going to get some sight back in that left eye, and you're going to get some sight back in that left eye. And so I was just like, I started learning some blindness skills because I didn't know how much sight I was going to get back, but I was like, this is, it's temporary. I'll learn the stuff, but it's temporary. And being deaf in one ear wasn't really that big of a deal if I was going to get some sight back. And then one day, one of the ICU doctors was making her rounds and just had the worst bedside manner ever, in the sense that there was zero warning and no like preamble into it. She was just going down her chart or whatever, and just nonchalantly announced that I was going to be totally blind forever, and like I wasn't going to get any sight back. And then she just kind of, there's kind of that, like, what the F did you just say exchange, and then she just kind of left. But that day, when my parents got to the hospital later that day, we were talking, and that we were talking about like what my future might look like. And my mom's like, oh, well, you can get a guide dog. And my dad's throwing out like, oh, well, maybe you could be a therapist. And like, I don't know what my mind went to the salt and pepper shakers in the Marine Corps chow halls on the north side of Camp Pendleton. At least, like, that's in our chow hall on base, the salt and pepper shakers in really tiny print said made proudly by the blind and visually impaired on them. And so my mind snapped to that, and I was like, I'm not making fucking salt and pepper shakers. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I explained it, but I was like, yeah, for whatever, like, I'd never been around a blind person before, so I didn't know what they could do, but I was like, I'm not just going to do that. That is not, I had a very successful career in the Marine Corps for those 4 years. I was in school to become an ER nurse. I was not just going to wind up doing something that wasn't serving and wasn't giving me, didn't have a larger purpose to it. And So I started chasing my independence, and 8.5 months after I pulled the trigger, I was snowboarding again. A month after that, I was back in college, and 6 months after that, I was back out on my own. And then, it's just kept pushing forward from there. And eventually it is where I started to finally, I think I finally started to process everything, so you follow that timeline. I was back out on my own in the middle of 2020 and bought my first house at the end of 2020. Was, going to school and I was going to school for an undergrad degree in clinical psychology because I was going to go on to get a graduate degree and try and turn this into something that could help someone else. But that, that's his COVID lockdowns. I'm living in Denver, completely back out on my own, don't know anyone there, and was over winter break as well. And I just like that early period of 2021, those first several months, I still think was probably the worst depression that I've ever gone through. And that's why I harp on that fact of speaking up has gotten me through all of this, because I learned from my mistake that I made in 2019. And in those early months of 2021, like by all measures, I had everything that I'd wanted. I'd gotten back in college. I was restoring a sense of normalcy to my life. I was back out on my own, which was the huge thing that I wanted, because I had to relearn everything when I was in the hospital. I had to relearn how to walk and brush my teeth and feed myself and go to the bathroom. And then, so that was all I wanted. When I had that again, it was like, as the pace of everything was slowing down, for whatever reason, I had hit that point where I didn't want to be here again. It did not make sense to me, because again, I had achieved everything that I wanted. But I think it finally started the reality of how much harder everything was now, and all the hoops that I was having to jump through, even just to, pay a bill, because trying to do that blind is ridiculous. But then doing college work and just not having a sense of community or anything really hit me. And I saw the writing on the wall with where that was going. And at that point, I've seen a therapist consistently once a week, if I'm in town, once a week for the past 6 years now, basically. And at that point, we were doing weekly calls, and my therapist called one day, and I had really struggled with the idea of saying something, because I thought that, especially given the fact that I had just shot myself a year beforehand, or almost 2 years beforehand at that point, that someone was going to come rip me out of my house and put me in a psych ward somewhere. And I was just going to be stuck there until someone thought, okay, now he can go home. But I realized, like, if I didn't say anything, I was going to end up right back doing something crazy again. And so I actually spoke up one day when she called, and it was probably single-handedly the bravest thing that I've ever done, because I was so terrified. But that's not what happened. She was there for me and was determined to help me get through it. So we went from talking once a week to every day, and sometimes it was multiple times a day, because I was in that bad of a spot. Like, I was counting minutes sometimes, just like trying to all right, just get through whatever this wave of this is, and just get through it. But I started to pull out of it, and that over the course of a couple months. And that was a huge learning point for me, where I realized that the sentiment of "this too shall pass," if so long as I show up and do the work. Like, what got me out of that is because I spoke up, and I made that conscious decision to say fuck it and deal with the consequences of speaking up. And I would not do that to myself or to my family again. And so, things kept pushing forward, and that summer actually is when I reignited the alcoholism that I hadn't realized that I had, because to me, an alcoholic wasn't someone who was working full time and going to school full time and like doing well in both of those fields beforehand. So naively, I didn't think that I was an alcoholic, and I had reached this point in college, because everything that I do, basically technology, my phone and my computers can read textual information allowed to me. It's called screen reading software, real creative name, but that, most things aren't accessible. Even I let your team know, like, I can't get on StreamYard on my computer because the software developers who developed StreamYard didn't do it the right way, so I can't use it with a screen reader. But those same things applied to my college classes, and especially I'd hit my first math class, and my college was legally obligated to convert materials to make them accessible for me, and they weren't doing it over the summer semester, so I guess they were short-staffed or whatever. And I reached this point where I was frustrated, I think, with where everything was at, and the fact that I couldn't do my fucking math homework because the people at the college weren't doing their job, and instead they assigned someone to be my eyeballs. Because I was fully independent at that point, like, that slapping me back in that position where I had to rely on someone else drove me nuts. And the night that I took my first exam, I ordered some alcohol. That kicked off 2.5 years of alcoholism. But that also, I started researching how come I could pay my mortgage but not do my math homework? How come I could take an Uber but not a Lyft? And that's when I found out about all of the code being the driving factor as to what was accessible to me and what wasn't. And most digital things are inaccessible with screen reading software or whatever access technologies different people with disabilities have to use. And so when I found out that it came down to the code running behind the scenes of each Apple website that I was accessing, I decided to become part of the solution. And I dropped out of college to teach myself how to code in October of 2021. I dropped out of college, and then that's when I started teaching myself how to code. And my first app came out on the 4th of July in 2023 and won a couple Game of the Year awards at the end of the year for that, because it looked and functioned normally to people without disabilities, but it was also whether you were colorblind, legally blind, totally blind and totally deaf, or had no arms, or were paralyzed from the neck down, everyone could use it, because I had applied all of these technological solutions that I had learned about and worked on over those couple of years to make it that way. And that was like a proof of concept for me. And at the same time, that's when I started making progress with my alcoholism, because I had, in the time in between that summer class when I started drinking again and that app coming out, that was October 2021 to July of 2023, I had been admitted to the psych ward once because I had self-admitted because I was drunk and thought that I was going to kill myself. I had reached the point where I was at its worst, was binging for 2 or 3 days straight, just blackout binges for 72 hours, and then would take 2 or 3 days to recover and then do it all over again. And I had tried AA and an outpatient rehab program and an inpatient rehab program. And it's while I was at that inpatient rehab program that I was diagnosed with that genetic disease that it's called Huntington's disease. And if there are, barring any medical advances, it will turn me into a vegetable at some point before I die from something secondary like pneumonia. And so I just, I came back from rehab, and it's like, now I had another excuse, like another poor me excuse to drink. And so I did. And I just got to such a pitiful place with all this. But then this app came out, and I started getting emails from people. It was specifically people with disabilities, where it was like, hey man, like, I'm able to play this with my wife or play this with my friends or whatever. Just thank you for making something that is accessible. And I started together like a month of sobriety and then 2.5 months. And I haven't had a drink since December 5th of 2023. And like I said, at the end of the year, there won 2 Game of the Year awards. And I know that was a lot, so I can pause there.
It's definitely. If you're just joining us, we're on with USMC veteran, writer, athlete, entrepreneur, who is also completely blind, Zach Tidwell. Zach, that is a very deep story you just told. And you said earlier we're going to get into the dark stuff, and you kind of just keep bringing more in there. And now you're shining some of that light coming out. And I think the audience is grasping that. We got a couple questions in the chat right now. We got one from at Louis97. After losing your sight, You refused to let it define you. What was the turning point that made you say, I'm not done yet, and push forward? Thank you, Louis.
It literally, it was that I don't know if you were in here for this earlier, Louis. There was a conversation the day that it was dropped on me that I was not going to get any of my sight back. There was a conversation where my parents were discussing my future, and it snapped back to my realization, or what I thought a blind person was capable of. And it was to the salt and pepper shakers and the Marine Corps chow hall that said "made proudly by the blind and visually impaired" on them. And I said, I'm not fucking making salt and pepper shakers. It was literally in that moment, like, I was angry. Like, I'm not going to become someone who's not doing something purposeful and who to live a life that's not impactful. And it was that moment in the hospital.
Definitely. And that's the Lighthouse for the Blind. They make a lot of products. I remember the Skillcraft pens in the Army. Those were made by Lighthouse for the Blind. And I put that link in the chat so you can check them out. It is a real place that employs visually impaired persons or people to make those products and sell them around the world. And just like the salt and pepper shakers that stuck out in his mind and helped him to get over the hump and move forward in life. And I guess salt and pepper shakers, and these are probably made by the blind, is something that it'll be forever on your brain housing unit in there, that you'll always remember that and keep pushing you forward. So that's a good thing.
I haven't heard that term in forever. The brain housing unit.
I'm sure you heard that 311.
Yeah. that and testicular fortitude are solutions. Yeah.
They go hand in hand. Yes.
Yeah.
And this one is from Mary Moe, at Mary Moe. From software development to extreme sports, you've proven that limits are often self-imposed. What advice do you have for people struggling to push past their own mental barriers? Thank you, Mary Moe.
This might seem like a cop-out, but I can expand on this. It's your mental barriers are you getting in your own way, and people I get asked stuff like that a lot. And usually if you stop and think, if you're the one asking that, and you stop and think, if you're that person who's trying to be like, man, how do I get past this? You know the answer. The problem is the solution is usually uncomfortable because it's going to require growth. And so that intuition that you have, and that inkling feeling of, this is probably what I need to do, like, that's usually right. And especially if it seems like it's going to be uncomfortable. And so it's, and I don't mean that to be a dickhead, but like, some of this stuff it's discipline, or it is just deciding it is, I have agency in this world still, or despite whatever situation or circumstance you're in. You may not have full control over the environment around you, but you have all of the agency in the world and the ability to respond to that. Like, you still have a choice.
Definitely, everyone has a choice in what they do in life, and you can do the woe is me thing and keep yourself down, or you can kick yourself in that fourth point of contact and move forward. You talked about your software development, your app, the game. It's awesome. You have not even touched on something I think is even more incredible, that you still do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and you compete with able-bodied people. Tell the audience about that.
Yeah, I didn't start doing that until I was blind. I wrestled in high school, and then we do the BS Marine Corps martial arts program, which is really just an excuse. Like, you do it in boot camp, and then when you do that in a ground unit, it's just an excuse for your seniors to beat up on you. Like, that's all. It's just sanctioned hazing. So, but I was, I loved wrestling when I wrestled in high school, and wish that I had started it earlier. And I had been interested in jiu-jitsu when I was in the Marines, but was gone all the time, and also couldn't really justify paying that much money for a gym membership. So it was after I was blind and I got back out on my own and was up in downtown Denver, I found a gym that was within walking distance of my house, and I learned how to get there. And, you know, before, it was a 15 or 20-minute walk to the gym. So like in the time in between, I got lucky, and the gym's manager and then people at the gym that I met from training there were willing to pick me up and give me rides before I knew how to get there, and would have even when I once I knew how to get there on foot. But I liked that independence and doing all that stuff. So that's been training for 4 years now. So I'm a 3-stripe blue belt, and I'm getting ready to compete in another tournament here next month. So it's that'll be the first time I've competed in about a year. So it's all, if you're not familiar with jiu-jitsu, it's not striking based. So I'm not getting punched in the face or kicked in the head or anything. It's grappling. So it's kind of like wrestling, except you can choke each other and manipulate each other's joints to get like an arm bar to break someone's arm, or a knee bar to break someone's knee, or rip an ankle apart and stuff like that. So it's all by touch. And really, once I'm on the ground, especially, it's a totally even game, because I can do so much of it by feel, because it is a game of give and take of space.
Outstanding. And to do it after you went blind and never having done it before, just the wrestling aspect of it you did. So that's kudos to you to be able to learn that and still get out there and have fun and toss people around as much as you can.
Yeah, dude, it's been, I mean, it's valuable to know how to defend yourself anyways, but and that's initially why I got into it, but it has become something that I'm addicted to. I'm not, I am pretty mediocre at it, but I really enjoy it. And it's another thing where, you know, it's hard to do. And those doing those hard things is good for you.
Heck yeah, it is. And that's what keeps us alive. It keeps us going, doing those hard things. Yeah. I've got another question. This is from one of our Tuesday crew hosts, Jake Holland. Did your experience negatively or positively affect your faith? Thanks, Jake.
It hasn't affected it. I wasn't. I was agnostic, and would say I'm still probably agnostic, but I like the idea that there's something, and I say that I like the idea that there's something out there. I think it's very, very possible that there's something out there that's bigger than us. I don't think it's the way that it's necessarily portrayed in religion. You know, I like the idea that there's an all-knowing thing out there somewhere. You know, maybe that's the universe or whatever. It hasn't shaken or really changed the ball on that, I don't think.
If it probably just kept you level with what you had before, I think, because it didn't make you either more forward or more against it. So, and what you're saying, it kind of just kept you same as where you were.
Well, I actually, man, I struggled with it, and kind of speaking to that, the pity party, that like I definitely went through that phase, especially during the alcoholism, right? I had my alcoholism was, it's avoiding, you know, dealing with things. It's escaping. It is ultimately, for me, I drank away my ability to cope with stress, because anytime something was getting mentally uncomfortable for me, that was another excuse to drink. And so over time, the bar for me to drink became less and less, to the point where, you know, I wasn't eventually dealing with anything. I was just drinking instead. And I would say in that time, especially after I got diagnosed with Huntington's disease, was like, you know, if there's like, there couldn't be like people, it doesn't make sense for there to be something out there, because, you know, why did I shoot myself in the face? Why do I have this shit now going on? And why, like, all these, it was like, oh, like, poor me, these things are getting stacked up against me. And that's not the right way to think about those things. And so for a while there, I would say my own poor choices was kind of eroding at that thought of maybe there is something bigger out there. But yeah, as I've stopped being a shitbag, I've gotten back to a point where I'm like, I definitely think there could be and probably is something out there that's bigger than us.
Outstanding. And we all learn and grow as things happen to us or things don't go our way. We kind of learn and grow our right path. The path that chooses us is the path that we go on. I wouldn't say it's the path less chosen because they're both the same path. You just have to choose to do the hard things or take the easy one. And I think you by happenstance chose the hard way and are finding the easy path. So.
Yeah, I guess it's a lot easier to find a silver lining in things when you're not hungover and sick any of the time that you're actually cognizant. So, yeah,
100%. Another question from Mrs. Hulna, Hulna. You compete in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu against able-bodied opponents. How do you mentally and physically prepare for something that most people would see as impossible?
I don't really prepare for it. It is what it is. It's a very nerve-wracking thing, and especially competing to me when I get beat, that's embarrassing. When it's one-on-one and anything like that, that's whether it's wrestling or any other sport that's one-on-one, like, it's who's the bigger, badder man here. And so that's a tough thing for me. And so I get really amped in the minutes before it's time for me to compete, but I don't spend a lot of time trying to like lock myself into a mode. I just do it. But physically, I'm very, very active. I lift weights 6 days a week, and then I go to class for typically 5 days a week. And I ski and I rock climb and I whitewater kayak and do a bunch of other crazy stuff. But those things are all more intermittent. Like my consistent thing is I am training every day, and most days it's 2 times a day. It's weight training at one of those sessions and then jiu-jitsu the other.
Awesome. Thank you, Mrs. Holma. And another question from I am there, you here? Your story includes battles with alcoholism, a suicide attempt, and an incurable disease. And here you are, thriving. What's your message to someone who feels like they're at rock bottom right now?
Because this comes back to speaking up. If you're at that spot, and if you mean that rock bottom in the sense of also being at that point where you feel like you'd be better off not being here, you have to speak up. You have to tell somebody. It can and will get better, but no one can help you if you don't help yourself first. And that helping yourself is telling someone, whether that's a therapist, whether it's a friend, whether it's calling the 988, which is the suicide hotline. I've called them once before. You have to speak up, and just keeping that, knowing that there is light at the end of the tunnel if you are willing to show up and do that work. And it is going to be uncomfortable, but it will get easier. That will get less uncomfortable. I used to not be able to even talk about the stuff that happened with my ex-wife. I would get all sweaty and shut down and get angry about it. And same thing with shooting myself and a lot of these other things. And like, you have to know that it's not going to be a quick fix, but that there is a fix there. And if it's just rock bottom in the sense of your circumstances, and you're not maybe struggling necessarily with suicidal ideations, then you got to stop and introspect a little bit and see, okay, what is it about my life right now that's making me unhappy? And then just be deliberate about piecing together how you can take action on those items that are causing that discomfort. I've had that. I've for me, that was, okay, I needed my independence back. I got that back. And then eventually it was the alcoholism, and then realizing that I didn't have a purpose. And so I needed to figure out what my purpose was. And I thought that would be the psychology piece. And it wasn't that. It became the coding and then the speaking and the writing and stuff like that. And just can't give up on yourself. And again, unfortunately, like these things are any improvement like that, getting out of a hole, whether that be in whatever capacity that might be, isn't just know that it's a a marathon and not a sprint with that stuff.
Definitely, life is definitely a marathon. It's not a sprint. If you're sprinting through life, and you're missing a lot of stuff, and you're probably going to crash into a wall anyway. So you might as well just take it slow, like the tortoise.
Yeah.
Tortoise in the hare. Think about that.
Make it hurt less when you do hit the wall.
Yeah, you can bounce off a little better when you go slow.
Yeah.
It's not as detrimental to your life when you run into a wall at 4 miles per hour, vice 40 or 50. So.
Yeah.
Zach, what's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
Big thing. My book is I'm about to start working through the 3rd draft here, and then I plan on trying to get an agent. So I have a mailing list on my website at zachtidwell.net, which is just for updates about the book. I've had the thing for over a year and haven't sent out any emails yet because I'm making a point to not spam people, but go there. It's also where you can contact me for speaking engagements. Also, if you Google me, I am all over on social medias. And I also have my own podcast called Going In Blind with Zach Tidwell. And that is anywhere that you can find podcasts.
And I've shared most of Zach's links so far in the chat, and they are all on the show notes. If you go to your show notes and description, they are in there. Zach, we have one more question from the audience that just popped up as well while you were giving that. This is from JB Gamer 65. What's next for you? More competition, finishing your memoir, or something completely unexpected?
It's a lot. The more competition, always being active, always finding new ways to be adventurous. But the book is going to be huge for me. This podcast is only a couple months old, so I'm really trying to grow that and just help other people get their stories out there and have meaningful conversations that people can learn from in whatever capacity that might be, whether that be with a thought leader or researcher, or I just had a former Navy SEAL and two-time Bronze Star with a Valor Device recipient on today, and having those conversations where you want to talk about dude, just obviously those dudes have a different mental gear, man, and being able to help people grow through that. But also I'm working on another software project that is just like the first one, will be something that looks and functions normally for people without disabilities, but is accessible to everyone. And that is in the education space, and is hopefully going to revolutionize education for people with disabilities, but also give people without disabilities access to those same cutting edge technologies that I'm making. And so hoping that one will grow into a true startup. That first app was a test run to make sure that I could do all of this on my own, and it was a huge success. So I've moved on to the next thing and to try and have a bigger impact.
Awesome. Just keep taking those challenges and accept them. And I think you'll keep helping others while you're also helping yourself get through everything you do. And I think you're doing so much right now at one time. As long as you're busy right now, I think you're gonna keep hitting the ceiling and crashing through it and making a new ceiling to go to. Zach, this has been a great conversation over the last almost 50 minutes. Before I let you go, something we ask our guests to try to help our audience on their way out is, what's 3 things that you do that you think make you successful that they can start doing tomorrow?
I physically put myself through the ringer, and I hit it hard every day. Like I said, I'm training, lifting weights 6 days a week, and then hitting jiu-jitsu most of the time 5 days a week, sometimes four days a week. Like these are hard things. Yeah, you might not have access to weights or the jiu-jitsu gym, but you can push yourself physically. I think pushing yourself physically is huge. I'm constantly listening, since I can't physically look at a thing to read. I'm constantly consuming things that I can learn from. Right now, that's the past couple of months has been a lot of business stuff, trying to make sure that I do that right with this startup. But you should always be looking to grow physically and mentally in terms of knowledge in that sense. But 3, I think 3 is find something outside of yourself, like that you can do that will help others, and that's something that you're not directly getting any sort of no kickback from. You're just doing it to help people in service of others, and you will be shocked at the impact that it has on you mentally, and that the rewards that you get out of that just intrinsically.
Awesome. Thank you, Zach. And Zach's website is going across the bottom of the screen right now. It is in the chat as well. All his Apple Podcast, his Spotify, his YouTube, his X, LinkedIn, Facebook are all in the chat as well. Link in with him, follow him, and give him the support as his book starts to come to fruition, and get that book and maybe learn some lessons from him and laugh at when he laughs. And when he talks about the hard things, go through those hard things with him, and maybe you won't have to in your life. Zach, this has been a great conversation. Thanks for hanging out with us tonight. Thanks for choosing to hang out with us on a Sunday night when you can be doing so many other things out there in Denver. But it's been a great chat.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, man.
All right, brother. You have a good night.
You too. Bye.
MisFit Nation, have a great one. We'll see you on Tuesday with the Tuesday Crew and Ryan Christensen.
This message is from the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. Did you serve in the military? If so, you can obtain a free lifetime pass to more than 2,000 federal recreation sites. These sites are located across more than 400 million acres of public lands, including national parks, wildlife refuges, and forests. The lands host activities to fit any lifestyle: hiking, biking, fishing, camping, and much more. Gold Star families are also eligible for these free lifetime passes. Plus, they cover entrance fees for a driver and all passengers in a car, or up to 3 additional adults at sites that charge per person. Obtaining one is easy. Just go to the National Park Service website, nps.gov, or the National Park Service app.
Thanks for checking us out and being a part of the MisFit Nation show. Don't forget to visit our website at themisfitnation.com. That's themisfitnation.com. Check out all our past episodes and get some of the great MisFit Nation gear for you and your family. As always, be humble, stay hungry, and keep hustling, because we are
MisFit Nation. MisFit Nation.